I'm Steve Sebelius here at the campus of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in the Advanced Engineering Building. We're continuing our series of panel discussions with local voters. Today we're going to talk to some young voters here at UNLV. So first I'm going to introduce all of our panelists. Anthony Pekulin is a senior majoring in journalism and media studies here at UNLV. Also vice president of the Public Relations Student Society of America chapter. Anthony, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Carolyn Salvador Avila is a senior majoring in pre-law and pre-med. She's also the president of the National College Democrats. She is the first Nevadan and the first Latina to hold that position and to be elected to that position. Amber Blow, a junior at the Berklee College of Music, majoring in music business and an on-air personality and production coordinator for KCBP 88.1 here in Las Vegas. And Edward Delgado Ochoa is a sophomore, poli-sci, and history major in the Honors College here at UNLV. So thank you guys for doing this. I really appreciate it. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go down the line. We'll start with you, Anthony, and I'm going to ask you what your number one issue is for this election. The number one thing that's going to get you to go out to the polls, the number one thing you're concerned about. It can be federal, it can be state, it can be local, whatever it is. So why don't we start with you, Anthony? Tell us what's your number one issue, and then we'll go down the line, and then we'll come back and we'll talk more about each one.
Well, especially as like a young Nevadan, I think my biggest issue is environmental issues, both on like a federal climate action perspective, but even in a local realm. Especially with a lot of like threats to like our air quality and water quality and supply in the valley. I think those kind of things really worry me, and that's the things that I really need to focus on.
Okay, sounds good. Carolyn, you, your number one issue, what's going to get you to go to the polls in November?
For me, what's most important is gun violence prevention. I was here on December 6th. I was in the building that the shooter went into, and that's a day that I'm never going to forget about. I know growing up here, it's been pretty consistent for us, learning how to do the drills. It's kind of become a normalized part of our society. And I have a little brother as well who's had a couple close calls at his high school, so that's definitely going to get me to go out there and vote.
Okay, sounds good. Amber, what about you? What's your number one issue for the November election?
Women's reproductive health is at the forefront for me. As a young woman, a young driven woman, I need to know that myself and my peers have full autonomy over our bodies. So that is definitely going to drive me to the polls.
Okay, sounds good. Edward, what about you? What's your number one issue?
Thank you, Steve. For me, my number one issue is the economy, especially living in Las Vegas where we're a tourist economy. There's a lot of people who work in these hospitality realm occupations, and so how that influences their personal lives is pretty much something that is also of an important issue, at least for myself with the economy.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's go back, Anthony. We'll talk more about the environment. I know that is a big concern, and I think it might be a bigger concern for younger people than it is for older people, because. To be frank about it, older people think, well, you know, I'm not going to be here forever. My mortality is before me in ways that it is not for younger voters. Talk more about that. Do you think enough is being done? Is enough attention being paid? We've heard so much more about climate now than we used to, and there's more attention to recycling, for buying electric cars, all those kind of things. But the problem still seems to be getting worse. I say that in Las Vegas, where we had the hottest summer on the record.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, back to your point, that is actually a really big thing, is that as a young person, that I see climate as a battle that I'm going to be fighting for the rest of my life. I see that realistically that it's just going to be challenges and after challenges. And I'd love to see like that we are taking some action with the Paris Agreement, of course, and then Biden's Inflation Reduction Act that also put in a lot of great environmental incentives, but that is only going to be lasting for the next 8 years or so. And even next year, we're going to have to create a new benchmark of emissions by 2035. And the next administration does have the power to disincentivize it, deprioritize these issues. So that's why I really want to make sure that a candidate that I might vote for will continue on with fighting this fight for me.
Yeah, I see a lot of people nodding. You guys agree that environment should be a priority for the next presidential administration?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%, especially because we live here in Nevada. I know us as students, I'm on the mock trial team, we travel quite a bit, and something that really kind of marked me and brought my attention specifically to this was we were driving to a competition in Arizona, and we saw a dock that was still connected to one of the rocks at Lake Mead, and it was floating. And that's just kind of, it's completely jarring to me, and you start to look into some of the agreements that we have as a state, you know, the water that we have entitled to us, and the ways in which the other states that are also involved in those water agreements may or may not necessarily be doing the best to preserve the water that we have, which is not that much. And so it's a scary issue, not just for us as a generation that's going to have to worry about this going forward, but also specifically as Nevadans.
Yeah, from your guys' perspective, is enough being done on climate? Is the people in charge now, have they done enough, or can they do more?
I think more can always be done. I mean, it's really interesting. One of the blessings that I have in my life is that I get to travel internationally a lot. So I actually spent some time over in Paris and Amsterdam during the Olympics, and one of the things that stuck out to me over there was how environment forward they were. I mean, you always got paper products, and they were really big on making sure you recycled. And it wasn't like, oh, if you accidentally throw it in the bin, we'll look the other way. It was like, no, you need to recycle. People were riding more bikes, and you saw more fuel efficient vehicles and stuff like that. So when you go to another part of the world where you see it as a norm, it kind of makes you think like, you know, we could be doing a lot more, for sure.
Yeah.
I also personally agree. I think more can be done. I personally like to go out to the mountains, and when I come back to the city, I usually see the dome of smog, and it really puts into question of whether the air I breathe is really healthy, or even just for like also seniors, right? Would that also be of health concern for them? And so I definitely agree with my colleague that there needs to be more done to at least have a better environment for our younger population.
Yeah, and we see, there was a story in the newspaper the other day, is there enough land to allow for development? But the question is hardly ever asked, is there enough water to support that development? And you just take a look at Lake Mead, as you said, and you see how far it's come down, and drought restrictions going into effect for the lake, and a lot of fighting over water issues. But that's a real thing for us here in Las Vegas. Okay, let's talk about the issue Carolyn brought up, and that's gun violence. And certainly everybody who lives in Las Vegas knows that that's an issue, not just because of UNLV, but the worst mass shooting in American history happened in this town at the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival in 2017. Efforts have been made in the legislature and even at the national level to try to ban bump stocks, ban ghost guns, regulate the age at which you can purchase firearms. And really, it's run into a lot of problems, not only from people opposed to gun regulations, but also the Supreme Court, which has held that gun rights are individual rights. You don't have to be in the militia, they say, and that's something that has kind of frustrated attempts to do regulation. Just this week, another shooting at a school. So tell me how that issue affects you when you come to school, when you're just going about your daily life. It must have changed how you look at everything.
Completely. To be completely honest, Steve, I actually didn't start taking classes in person again until this fall. I was terrified, and I have to say, it comes down to even just walking past, and I don't know if this is too much to say, but that day when we were eventually walked out of the building, we actually saw his body on the floor, and it's something that you can't really get rid of in your head. It leaves you with a lot of things to think about. I remember specifically right after December 6th, it took me a while to kind of talk about this issue because it's confusing. You feel guilty for living. You feel guilty for feeling guilty for living. You feel guilty for not really wanting all the thoughts and prayers, but then you feel angry when you get thoughts and prayers because you want action. And I think that's something that unifies a lot of us. I am the president of College Dems, but at the same time, I've got some friends on the other side of the aisle that quite frankly are voting a lot more aligned with me in this election because of these issues and because of how terrified we are. When the shooting happened the other day in Georgia, I didn't realize how triggering that would be for me, and that's something that I guess I'm gonna have to live with for the rest of my life, and something that I realized that day is now gonna be affecting those kids for the rest of their lives. And it's something that continues to happen again and again and again. And honestly, I mean, I will say it's frustrating to see this issue be so politicized, be so divisive for people. I am of the belief that first comes the safety of our students, and not just our students, right? This is an issue for everybody. Mass shootings, October 1st was not for students, that was for our entire community, and we saw how devastating that was for Las Vegas. And so for me, I guess it's just, we want to see progress. We don't want to move backwards. We don't want the Supreme Court to tell us how we're not going to solve this issue. We want solutions.
Let me ask you guys. You know, when I went to school many years ago, we never thought about gun violence. It was just not something that would enter our minds. And nowadays, it's everywhere. And do you guys think about that on a regular basis?
100%. Yeah,
Absolutely.
without a doubt.
And it's actually kind of weird because I think we think about it so much that it's kind of interesting to see how the world reacts to these situations now, because unfortunately as a society I think we've become so desensitized. You know, we see so many of these incidents happen that it literally is like thoughts and prayers, but then you have individuals who are literally traumatized. And sometimes when you are used to seeing it so much and you're not used to seeing that action, you don't really know how to step into those emotions or advocate properly or even react properly. So it's definitely an issue that I think we have to worry about way more than the generations that came before us.
I will say, just to kind of add a little bit to that, it's incredible how the desensitization that comes along with us preparing for this since kindergarten, since first grade, how it affects the way in which we react to these sorts of situations. When it was happening in that moment, I was on the second floor of the student union, and I was in an event with about 100 kids, and so many people. Obviously, you have the people that are sobbing, they're scared, and they're trying to muffle themselves to not make any noise. But then you have the students that are so unbelievably in disbelief that this could be true. I myself, when the reason that I knew that it was real was because somebody came running down the hallway to tell me to get into the room because it was not a drill and that there was a shooter on campus. And I walked into the room and I still thought, no, it's probably a drill. And then the DJ kept playing music, the lights were still on, and it took everybody getting a text message saying shots fired in BEH, which was right next to us, to kind of realize that this was true. And that's when my friends and I, we were trying to get in touch with our families. Some people started writing goodbye notes to their families in the notebooks, which was really kind of terrifying to go back and see when we picked up our backpacks and everything. And then, of course, everything that we heard after that.
Amber, let's talk about the issue that you brought up. This is a huge issue. I was talking to somebody today, and I said, 3 years ago, this really wasn't that big of an issue. We had a consensus, uneasy and imperfect as it was. We had a consensus, and everything was normal, and it had been for 50 years. Then the Supreme Court comes along and overturns Roe v. Wade, and all of a sudden we now have a patchwork of different laws in different states, and whether you can have access to that a form of health care depends on what side of a state line you're on. And so that has really thrust this issue back into politics in a way that it really was never before. It was always an academic issue before. Now it's a supremely personal issue.
Absolutely.
And people sharing these supremely personal stories. So tell me about that. Tell me about, it's important to you, and what do you think needs to be done?
Well, first and foremost, I have to give credit where credit is due, because fortunately here in Nevada, they've done a great job at protecting our reproductive rights here in our state. Unfortunately, the same can't be said across the country, where now it's up to each state to decide how they want to handle this issue. And it's heartbreaking because you go on social media, especially, and you see stories of women literally having to cross state lines so that they can take care of their reproductive health. Or, you know, there are some states now that want to criminalize it to the point of even considering the death penalty, which is insane. So I just think it's very interesting because statistically, when you see how we operate as a generation, we're doing everything a little bit later, right? So we're settling down a little bit later, having kids a little bit later, buying houses later, and that's kind of its own separate issue because that has to do with wage gaps and us trying to find stability in the economy especially. But when you think about all of these things and think about the extra time that we take to try to get ourselves together, that puts even more of an emphasis on the issue because we need to have a choice, you know? I could not imagine pursuing my career path right now with a child. And there are plenty of single mothers, married people who do it and do an amazing job at parenting their children, but you should have the choice. You should have the choice on what you want to do with your body. And I mean, that's not even mentioning the unfortunate incidents that happen where women, you know, are literally minding their business and then they find themselves in a traumatic situation and then they don't have the choice to make that choice about their bodies either. So I can definitely see why, you know, time is of the essence. We have definitely seen something that I'm not going to say took for granted, but it's definitely one of those things where you're like, wow, I really have to worry about this now. It's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Let me ask the men on the panel. This obviously is a really personal issue for women in a way that it's not for men. But how do you guys feel about that issue?
Well, I will never be able to, I'll never be directly affected by it within my own body. But all I can operate on is empathy. And I just believe that any woman should have complete autonomy and control over her body and her decisions that she makes. I feel like it's overstepping bounds and boundaries to impose these decisions and these morals onto somebody else. And especially with like how you mentioned that it's now the whole country is a kind of a patchwork of some states work, some states will not. It just adds more barriers and it makes these decisions, these health decisions, much more dangerous and much more dangerous for a woman when it should just be an in and out kind of procedure.
What do you think?
I personally believe that it's a conflicting issue, right? You have both sides of the ideology, right? I'm not a person who can really say or really knows much about the abortion issue at hand. However, I do believe that if an individual believes that they can do whatever they want with their body, for hence why we have the liberty of life and liberty, they should have the right to decide what they want to do, right? And so I guess that ultimately depends on the decision of the individuals and the parties involved.
You mentioned economy, and I know that's a very big issue. It may be kind of an underlying issue, but I think a lot of young people are dealing with that. You're dealing with student debt when you get out of college. You're dealing with finding a job. You're dealing with whether or not you'll be able to buy a house. You're dealing with increased prices, as we all are, at the gas pump, the grocery store, all of those things. So talking about the economy, you said that was your number one issue. What do you think needs to be done?
To be quite honest, I'm not an economist, right? But having it felt like in between my wallet, it's been pretty impactful. You know, as my colleagues are also laughing about, like it's true. Like we've all felt it, right? Being college students, we have the stereotypes of like being broke, right? But I mean, I recently went into a opening house for affordable senior living apartments, and so I was able to know like their point of view about the higher cost of the standard of living and how it's difficult with the rent constantly being increased and the difficulty of finding a house and also just the groceries growing. Of course, inflation has gone down, of course, but it's still, I believe that it hasn't been felt throughout society yet.
Yeah. If you look at the stats, it looks like it has gotten better, but it doesn't feel like it, right? It's like when you go to the store, and you guys can tell me. I mean, are you feeling it as well?
Absolutely. Definitely. I think also just because we are specifically Las Vegas, I mean, we saw how hard we were hit compared to the rest of the country in the recession just a little over a decade ago. And I think it's safe to say that no matter what happens economically, that pattern will continue. We'll continue to be the hardest hit by everything that happens because we're in a different sort of environment when it comes to money, right? Our community depends so much on tips. I mean, I'm first generation. My family is immigrants, and we are no stranger to the fact that you have to depend on the tourism and the people coming to town that are willing to spend more money on the tips that they give you to be able to make your payments, to be able to live, and also just as students, you know, just 100% being able to buy a house. I think a lot of students are expected to kind of be able to do the same things that the youth used to: start their family young, get married young, have a house, be homeowners before they're even 30. And at this point, it's hard to even own an apartment before 30 because it's incredible. You see these huge conglomerates that buy up these houses and then they put them out for rent for way more than they should be. It's making it extremely difficult for us, and I have to say student loans don't make it any easier. I mean, I know that this administration, the Biden administration, has done a couple things to try and deal with that issue, and I think it's a good first step because we're finally paying attention to it more. When in the past, I think it's been an issue that's been so ignored. But I do think that we need to work towards a more long-term solution. We need to figure out what we're going to do to maybe lower the interest rates for these loans so that they're more fair for the students that are taking them on for the rest of their lives. I've got a teacher who's over 50 years old and he's still got over $100,000 left for his student loans. I mean, it's incredible. This is not something that we want to be taking on.
And you can't really get out of that, right? I mean, you can't, even if you declare bankruptcy, you can't get out of
It
that.
follows you forever.
It's a struggle, and I'll definitely want to turn the point to our parents as well. Living in Las Vegas, as it's been told, we have the casinos, right? So most of our parents work in the casinos, and so once, during the pandemic, when the economy was going, a lot of layoffs, that impacted our families, and we saw that how it also impacted our family lifestyles, and so. The economy overall has a big influence not only on us as college students, as I mean it's also commuter schools, so which gas prices and whatnot, but also of our parents, which we rely on and seek guidance towards.
And
We haven't even talked about that parking pass.
Oh my gosh.
but also just to, you know,
Hang on a
add
second,
little
hang
bit.
on.
Also, just to add a little bit to what my colleague said about these conglomerates coming through and buying up these properties and hiking up the rent, hiking up some of these mortgage prices, I think that was so eye-opening, especially after the pandemic. I remember living in an apartment where my rent was pretty reasonable, and then the next notice that I got about the rent increase, which is normal, was a significant increase. And it seemed like that was happening all across the valley, and even though people were saying that they were struggling and outraged by, you know, the pricing, it seemed like, you know, the people who own these properties didn't really care. They were like, okay, well, I know I can get more, so you can move out and you can find somewhere else to go. So I think locally, it would be nice to see that being regulated a little bit more. The ability to really hike those prices past a reasonable, you know, level.
How many of you guys think you'll be able to buy a house by the time you're staying?
I hope. I really hope.
Yeah.
If I
Working
become
on
an
it.
attorney before 30, hopefully.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, absolutely. That's something that you don't really think about until you're in college. You start to look forward and like what you're going to do. What about finding jobs? Are you confident you're going to be able to find jobs when you get out? No, you see that?
No, I'm doing everything I can, and I'm very confident, but I can't say that I'm 100% certain just because journalism, media studies, I feel like that is not like the most prolific, job field right now, especially like with so many changes in the field, and that adds to the uncertainty that compounds with everything that they said about the economy. And now I just wonder, will I even have that future? Will I even have the opportunity to ever own anything for my own?
That's something. Well, let's do in the last few minutes that we have. Let's go down the line. We'll start here and go back. And you know, a lot of people say, well, young people are so impatient. They want change like that. And you just got to wait your turn, get in line, all those things that I'm sure you guys have heard your whole lives. And look, you're used to having everything right there on the phone instantly. So it's understandable that you would think, why does it take so long? So let's now suspend the rules, the rules of Congress, the rules of procedure, the rules of possibility, and let's talk about maybe one change that you could do. Whatever wish list, no barriers, whatever you want to do, one thing that you think would make things better. It can be on the issue you talked about. It can be on any issue. So Edward, what do you think about? What's the one thing you would make a change if you could?
Well, I mean, I think I'd probably stop the filibuster, due to the fact, like, there's so many bills that are being passed, right, or attempting to be passed, that could best help the society as a whole. And if we were to stop the filibuster, stop having more or less, we'll continue having these discussions, of course, but more or less having that instant gratification or change, as you say, could be beneficial for the society as a whole.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's something probably not a lot of people would think about, but that would be a significant change to get rid of the Senate filibuster, so that you would only need 51 as opposed to 60, or in the past it's been even higher number of votes to get something changed. That's a good one. Okay. Amber, what do you think?
So first of all, I just have to say, even though we are known as this instant gratification generation, I think it's put a fire under us. I think that the reason why people can't stand us sometimes is because we won't sit down and we won't be quiet. And I think that in the future, you know, it's actually going to serve us more than it's hurting us now. But to answer your question, I'm really big on human experience. I think a lot of times, kind of like when we were talking about the gun violence issue earlier, the reason why we see such heated debates and the reason why we can't see how others can't see basic rights for what they are is because they don't have certain experiences. And that can only happen by going outside and seeing who's in your community. I think people need to do that more. We've become so introverted, especially here in Vegas, because it is very fast paced. You have a lot of people who are on that same, you know, casino schedule. We have a lot of gig workers. We have a lot of people who are just really focused on themselves and their households. But if you were to step outside your door, talk to your neighbors, go to your local community centers, and just really tap into the different experiences around you, maybe it would help you just, you know, be a little bit more informative in your decision making, and maybe even go out and advocate a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. So get to know other people and their experiences and consider it from their perspective. That's a good one. Absolutely. Carolyn, what do you think? One change, you can do anything you want. What would you do?
You know, one change is not that many changes. But I would say, just to kind of take it a little bit further with what you were saying, involving more of our generation in politics. I would say I love seeing Gen Z run for office, but I think we need more of it. We've got a lot of people in Congress that have an incredible amount of experience. They've got wisdom, but what they don't have is the same lived experiences that we've got. We are a generation that's voting now, and we want to see ourselves represented, but a huge part of that is having people that are us in Congress representing us. People that have grown up in this post-Columbine society, having 2 drills a semester for school shootings ever since they were 5 years old, and who really understand why that sort of thing, why maybe an assault weapons ban or something like that would be so unifying for our generation. So I would say, more than anything, just kind of including us more.
Yeah. Do you think there would be big changes if that happened? If more Gen Zers were elected to office, do you think that would result in more change?
I gotta say, I think that having more Gen Z in office would actually get things done quicker, because yes, we do like instant gratification, but we work for it. I think we want to see the progress, and we wanna work towards it together. So I think the more Gen Z that you have in office, the less kind of run around that you'll be getting for a lot of issues.
All right, sounds good. Anthony, what do you think? One big change that would make a difference?
I just think that we need to really work on lifting up the floor, like lifting up like the bottom like percent of the people that feel unsupported. Like if we went over, many people in my generation that don't feel like we'll ever own a home, will never start a family. I feel like in the macro scale, we really, as a society, emphasize growth for the top percentage, for the top portion of the people, conglomerates, corporations. But when are we gonna be able to support the masses? People like me that worry about ever owning anything. So I feel like that's one thing I wish that we could change.
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed by all of you, but also by the fact that given everything we said on that last topic, you could do anything you want. No one said student debt relief. You were all focused on other people and making society as a whole better, as opposed to yourself. So there are some people who say they weep for the future. I do not weep for the future, especially after today. I think this has been great. Thank you all for taking the time to do it. I really appreciate getting your perspective. And we will have more panels with different groups of voters coming up. For now, reporting in Las Vegas, I'm Steve Sebelius.